about Rahul and Matias. Um, so I have been working with UrbZ. Like they are like the co-founders of UrbZ, and UrbZ is it's an experimental action and research collective specialized particularly in participatory planning and design. And our team has been working mainly in the homegrown neighborhoods all over the globe. So consider Mumbai, Goa, and even Geneva and other places, Sao Paulo. And I have been personally associated with them for over 5 years now, and it has been a really great journey. So we're expecting that this conversation would give us like more insights about their work and the kind of the studies and the research that they have been involved in over these years, and it would help us in opening many closed doors. So Rahul, Matthias, like, do you just want to take over?
Matthias, you should start.
Hello everybody. Hi Jay. Thank you for the invitation. Hello to all the students. So really happy to be able to talk to you today. Even though the invitation came a bit late, so we're not, we just have to do something pretty rapidly on the basis of some images and work we've done. So we hope that what Jay was asking us is that we introduce to you the concept of homegrown cities that we've been developing for quite some time. What is the homegrown? Why do we qualify some type of habitats as homegrown? So this is what we're going to be trying to do today. And yeah, I feel Rahul.
So I just switched off my video for now because my bandwidth is not very good in Goa because of the rain. So I hope you all can hear me clearly.
Yeah, Rahul, we can. Yeah. And thank you both of you for coming in such a short notice. Like, really thank you for that.
It's always good, Jay, to connect with you. You have been very much part of our team for many years now. So we are very happy to do this. And so, as Matthias said, that the homegrown neighborhood framework for us is a very important one. The focus of it is that each house, we need to look at the house very differently, where we look at each house as a productive space, a space of work, a place where people not only live, but they are also part of creating a value to use. And it is this incremental growth of the value of that space through use which allows for resources to keep improving it. So a homegrown neighborhood is literally where the home is the starting point of productivity in that space. And that tool house for us is a very important part of the homegrown neighborhood logic. The tool house essentially is a home which is also a space of work. And a home is already also a place of play as well. But when you multiply this, you get a neighborhood, which is what we call a homegrown neighborhood. Now, the reason why we focus on the tool house as a very important unit is because in many parts of the world, not only in India, but many parts of Asia, many parts of Africa, you will see that working from home is a very important economical way of operating for a large section of the population. It is not necessarily universal, but it is very significant for many places, and many kinds of crafts and many industries actually work very well with this form. We have seen, for example, tool houses in Europe. In Geneva, the clock making industry also works on the same principle. In Tokyo, research has shown that the domestic home factory has been a very important part of the growth of Tokyo as well as a city. But in India, for some reason, we have not been able to recognize this form. And this is what we have been trying to do. Matias, you want to carry on from here?
Yeah. I think maybe I'll just continue Rahul's introduction. So to give you some context, we've been working as UrbZ since about 2010. We met with Rahul in Mumbai. And UrbZ is really the coming together of an anthropological approach, which really looks at culture and how people come together in order to create their habitats, and urban planning. So the scale at which we always intervene, that we really kind of focusing on is the skill of the neighborhood. And we're specifically looking at contexts in which there has been no planning and no architect and no engineers. And we're looking at how the community, through all kinds of intensive processes, produces its own habitat, even in the face of all kinds of adversities, which can come from the context as well, from regulations, from the politics of a place, from economic hardship, from the environment. How do people kind of manage to come together and form and create neighborhoods, which then become functional enough that they can have activities, residential activities, economic activities, but also institutions such as schools, temples, and so on. So, Rahul, whenever you want to.
Yeah, I'll just add to this. So, in a sense, also through this process, what we also want to emphasize is there is a very strong value of the idea of locality itself. Local spaces actually have the capacity of generating resources and energy. And you will see that human beings who live in a particular place are also a resource. The environment immediately around them is also a resource. And in the context of Dharavi specifically, you can see how people's labor came in from different parts of the country and they began to contribute towards complementing various industries which already existed in Mumbai. And they also brought in skills, like, for example, the leather making industry, the potteries, the food processing industries, recycling also. And all of these things are linked to the social history of the communities who came. Many of them came from communities who were traditionally doing these activities. So that became a resource. So what we are also trying to show is that the homegrown neighborhood, which is related to the idea of the tool house, which creates value over generations, produces its own capital. And incrementally, that means little by little, bit by bit, generation by generation, the neighborhoods transform. As Matias mentioned, that the neighborhood starts producing infrastructure also of a different kind. So earlier homes may have been built, as people in Dharavi often say, from cardboard, from other simple material, cloth. And then over a period of time, the homes have changed. And what we have been participating in UrbZ is entering into this fabric, entering into this process and working from within. Now, at the same time, the homegrown neighborhood is not just about a place like Dharavi. It is not just about a neighborhood which has a history of a different kind of deprivation. This energy exists everywhere. And for us, the idea of the process of the homegrown neighborhood is something which needs to help us understand the value of locality in all aspects of contemporary life. Today, more than any other time, because of the coronavirus, we have seen how much everybody's spotlight is on their own neighborhood. What is it that we can resource? What is it? How does the retail at a local level operate? In a place like Goa, people are even exchanging food items which are made locally. There are communities which are emerging where pooling of land to create to grow vegetables, which can then be shared by the village. Now, think of locality as a resource which produces resilience, and that is how we also look at Dharavi. For us, Dharavi has never been a place of just there are marginal people who need help, or it's a slum story that we have always rejected. What is important for us is to look at Dharavi from the same prism in which we look at locality and the logic of the homegrown neighborhood. Now, this is, as Matias mentioned, that our backgrounds are anthropology and urban planning, and we have worked very closely with architects like Jay to bring it together and to understand what is the physical language of this incremental growth. And the whole project of ours, for example, Design Comes As We Build, is part of this narrative. Matias, over to you. You're on mute,
Matias.
Yeah. No, in truth, because this invitation came so late, we didn't have time to coordinate, and I'm gonna have a hard time to follow up like this. So maybe Rahul, I'll let you go on, and
okay.
I'll show images towards the end.
Okay, and then how much time do we have, Jay?
I won't be able to
Yeah.
We could take it for an hour, Rahul.
Take it for an hour. Then Matthias, shouldn't we also show them the design comes as we build a catalog if possible?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have this here, so I'll let you go on with the presentation. That will be much easier.
Okay. But then I think what would be good is that we should start taking question and answers, because the main points I've already mentioned, and normally what we do, Jay, is that we present it together with a presentation. So and since we don't have access to that, maybe what would be good is that on the basis of what we have said,
I do have some images I compiled, but it's it's in a certain structure. So,
exactly. No, you have the images compiled, Matthias?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I prepared something, the presentation.
No, so if you're prepared and why don't you just present that now, no?
Yeah, I mean, I can show you basically an introduction to what Jay asked me to do is to prepare something on the homegrown neighborhood and to present the concept.
But Matthias, it is open. Like if you were comfortable with whatever, like even if it's a rough work, it's okay. It's pretty cool.
It's better to continue in the mode of the conversation. And Rahul, please carry on because it's going to be easier.
I think what you have, I don't make the presentation. We have a lot of time. You make the presentation and then we can follow it up.
Just do this general introduction, and then once you're done, like I'll show some images. Okay,
that sounds good. So essentially, just to because we had to do a little bit of coordination, which we could not do over the weekend. So let's while Matthias is making that, I'll continue. So essentially, just to reiterate what we said earlier, is that the homegrown neighborhood concept is linked to the idea of the tool house. The tool house is linked to the idea of combining work and living activities. This is also connected to a larger understanding of the idea of locality as a resource itself, in the question of urban development. So let us play, this is the basic framework and structure. Now, within this narrative, our role has been to work with the design comes as we build a project, and the design comes as we build project is an architectural component of this larger narrative. If this much is clear to everybody, then maybe we can take a little 2-minute pause for taking any questions. Then I can proceed. What do you think, Jay?
Absolutely fine. Yeah, so if anybody has questions, like it would be nice to just ask, so that we have this kind of a to and fro, back and forth kind of a process where we have them also telling us something, and if you want some clarity about some things, like it is the right time for you to ask any questions. So students, you can just go ahead, even faculty members. Hello?
Yes, I'm waiting. Any questions?
Yeah, Isa, you have a question? I think they are still digesting it, Rahul.
Okay.
Guys, if you want, I can share my screen and show you some. I think maybe that'd be a good way to proceed. So 1 sec, I'll just do that. What's up? Okay, so I'm on 2 different screens because choose from here. Right, okay, all right. Okay, present. Okay. All right. So. Can you see the? I'm just.
Yes, Matthias.
Let's see one little image. I'm going to show it one of. Let me just check. I'm presenting the right thing. One second. I'm just trying to window. Okay. All right. I think now you should be able to see one image. See this? Okay, good. All right. You can see the screen I'm sharing now.
Yes, yes, Matias.
Okay. So I'm just in full screen. Okay. So I just to introduce the concept of the homegrown neighborhood. I just want to show you a few images from different neighborhoods around the world, places that we worked in or we studied for some time, and just basically to show what they have in common, in spite of being in very, very different contexts. So these are photos of Tokyo. It's a neighborhood called Shimokitazawa, which, like many other parts of Tokyo, has really developed incrementally after the war. So so it's a big mix, huh? It's going to go from one city to the other, and I'm just going to explain, why I think that they share. What do they share, and why it's interesting, why it's important to recognize what they share. This is a neighborhood in Sao Paulo called Paraísopolis, which is considered to be one of the biggest favela in Brazil, and in Sao Paulo, which is a very, very, of course, different quality, different stage of development. This is Shivaji Nagar in Mumbai, which I'm sure many people around here know a little bit about. And on this photo, you also see our former office in Shivaji Nagar. It's the kind of like the blue tarp in the mauve, in the kind of pinkish building. This is something we had built over there. And this is Shivaji Nagar from above. It's a very interesting special condition because it's actually a planned neighborhood. You can see the grid, which has over the years become a homegrown neighborhood, because people simply had to kind of respond to their needs and create their own, basically densify whatever little plots they had, and sometimes subdivide it, resell it. So an entire process has gone here. And the same process, pretty much happened in many, many other cities around the world. This is not a specific slum condition, and this is really something that we want to emphasize very clearly. This is again Tokyo. Tokyo has undergone the exact same process after the war. The entire city was flattened, and people had to just simply rebuild with whatever means they had. So artisans, local residents, people came together, and the country was definitely bankrupt. There was no money. They just had to make do with what they could, and over the years it consolidated. Over the years it grew. Over the years, different fabrics, different things came in. Over the years, big franchise, brands, banks, everything came into a fabric which was essentially homegrown. These are again streets of Tokyo, tiny, narrow streets. We saw a lot of mixed use. Economic activities embedded in residential areas, appropriation of spaces for different activities, markets. This is all the markers of an economy which has developed very much inside a residential fabric, and where in fact there is no clear distinction between the residential areas from the commercial areas. And this typically happens when there is no planning. And what is interesting about that process is that even though it's a process which seemed to be, let's say, disorganized, it actually creates a level of vibrancy, a level of vitality, and a level of resilience in neighborhoods, which planned neighborhoods usually don't have. So we see that very quickly the economy can go from extremely local, extremely artisanal, extremely kind of family-owned shops to franchise, to big brands, coming in. One doesn't prevent the other, but the fabric allows for this kind of like very local activities, which makes it resilient in the face of all kinds of economic conditions and allows incremental growth. And then over the years, what seems to be a very kind of disparate, disorganized, kind of incoherent type of construction and urbanization starts developing a very strong identity, start developing kind of cultural markers, starts being also, doesn't start, but just is continuously improved, beautified by the residents, and creates neighborhoods with very, very strong identity, with its cultural identity, with its economic identity. And we truly feel that this process is something fascinating and something that we need to recognize in order to understand how to deal with what we call the informal, what we call the slum. And in fact, we need to take this as a basis to completely reframe and rephrase how we describe even neighborhoods such as Dharavi, Shivaji Nagar. So we start looking at them in a different light, and the homegrown specifically refers to the ability of the neighborhood to grow from within. So this kind of strength and energy and sense of organization that happens at the local level is what the word homegrown really focuses on. So we really want to say that we have to pay attention to this process, because this process is a process of development, is a process of incremental development, which has led many towns, villages, cities around the world to grow successfully from being, maybe poor, marginalized, to being now neighborhoods which are seen to be perfectly integrated, perfectly economically sound, and healthy, and nice places to live in. The homegrown is also something which is part of, so it's part of an incremental process. It's part of historical process of formation of cities. Even though we have a hard time recognizing how this works, and this is not part of the kind of mainstream, let's say, urban development history. This is very much how cities around the world have developed over the years, over sometimes the centuries. Obviously India has lots of superb homegrown neighborhoods and old towns, which are often also dismissed. I mean, when you think about old Delhi, when you think about even if you go to let's say Ahmedabad, on the old city in Ahmedabad, these are all amazing examples of cities which are full of vibrancy, but which have been neglected because the typology didn't correspond to what mainstream urban planners, policymakers thought a city should look like. But there are many examples around the world of places which have grown through the same processes, but which have been valued and respected, sometimes by default because there was no means to do otherwise, sometimes by recognition of the importance and the quality of those places. For example, here is a city, it's one of the oldest medieval town in Europe, is the city of Freiburg in Switzerland. And when you look at the fabric of and the scale of those houses, we are in, it's not so different in terms of scale, in terms of typology, in terms of processes, from what is happening currently in parts of Mumbai, in many other, even let's say very new kind of suburbs which are developing. So those processes needs to be valued. I mean, this type of tiny house, which could totally also be the house of an artisan, which could also exist with a shop on the ground floor. is nothing, and be what we've been calling a tool house, and Rahul talked about it before. We think that there's nothing interestingly wrong with this type of urbanization, and it's not something which only belongs to the past. It's something that also belongs to the present, because this typology is relevant to how people live today still. And in fact, it's becoming more relevant now that we're saying that, our cities need to be more compact, that we need also to embed economic activities with residential areas, that we need to allow people to work from home. The tool house and typologies which really kind of are kind of slowly, incrementally formed and kind of consolidated are important. They're also important because, again, we switch from one to the other. This is Basel now, Old Town in Basel. The same process of slow structuration has also taken place in cities like this. Why this Old Town of this, again, Freiburg in Switzerland is interesting. This is basically a low-caste neighborhood where people were doing leather work, manual labor. This is kind of like the downtown. It was down from the hill by the river. It's a place where nobody wanted to live. And this is a place which has been continuously inhabited for the past at least 600 years and has been consolidated incrementally. The balls, you see kiosk, the balls, the balls were like this community of leather workers. Like the kind of high class people would not come down to this part of town. And now obviously it's a part of town that everybody loves and feel like there's a great atmosphere whenever there's a festival or whenever there's an occasion to celebrate. It's where people go. So yeah, we basically want to just always say like that this process of incremental development that we see all over the world, this is Bogota, is a process that is worth paying attention to, and that we should not dismiss it on the basis of the stage of the process in which the neighborhood is. So this is on the periphery, on the edge of Bogota. So obviously this is all very recent. This is, when I say very recent, it's a few, maybe 40 years old. Maybe it's those processes take generations. And the question is, how do we support those processes instead of dismissing them? How do we allow people to actually take pride, consolidate, invest in their houses, beautify the neighborhood, and how do the authorities understand how they can retrofit this type of typology? There's nothing which is impossible to do in terms of technology when it comes to bringing water, electricity. That's been done all over the world. It has been done over and over again. So we don't need to worry about the possibility of those neighborhoods to actually get better over time. So maybe Rahul, I'll let you add to.
Yeah. So just to continue with what Matias said, for us, this observation, this lens of understanding urbanism has been a very important part, and it's very good to see images from all over the world which have emerged from the same incremental process and which are not part of what people normally think are comparable. Very few people think you can compare a neighborhood in Geneva or in Switzerland to a neighborhood in Colombia, which is in a favela. Very few can compare a neighborhood in Tokyo or street in Tokyo with that in Dharavi. But by trying to focus and highlight on this particular process and understand this typology comes from resources within, we are trying to spotlight a slightly different trajectory of understanding urbanism. And within that space, as earlier we mentioned that as practitioners, as people from different diverse urban disciplines, planning, economics, anthropology, and architecture, we try to speak each other's language, try to translate this concept into different languages. So in the process of translating this concept in the language of architecture, we have produced the design comes as we build project, which we presume Jay has already spoken to you about. And now let us try to understand this process also from a different point of view, and which is that of economics. Say, like a lot of you may have questions that, well, yes, this is a certain kind of process which has happened, but how do we validate this, and how does this sit in with our existing practices? With our existing practices, as urbanists, where there are clients. It's a much more organized industry. In this organized industry, you have capital which comes in a certain way, certain form, and which burdens all of you as architects to say that, okay, I will design something afresh. How do you as architects understand this ongoing process and dovetail your energies into this is a big challenge. And what we have been arguing is that the state of the world economics today is in a state of some element of fragility. There is a crisis. There is an environmental crisis. There is a crisis of global economics. And what we are saying is that in this world of both environmental and ecological crisis, there is a new focus coming on the idea of locality everywhere. Everybody is talking about the idea of locality being very important for creating a more resilient economy. Now, in this case, our focus on homegrown neighborhoods becomes very, very important, because we can tell you our argument is that, yes, this has always been the case. Whenever the large economy has failed, people themselves have produced a certain form, a certain urbanism, in spite of all the challenges. Sometimes it is degraded because it is not validated and recognized. Sometimes it gets recognized and validated, and incrementally it grows. But it is there. And today, when we are in a state of a certain, a global fragility, both in environmental and economic terms, can we focus on locality afresh? And within locality, can we understand a language of urbanism which recognizes the homegrown neighborhood, which recognizes these incremental processes, which we have framed, as you saw in Matias's presentation, is a global experience also. It is a different kind of global experience, but it is there. So this is maybe a point where we can say that we would like to invite questions. Hopefully this is now clear to everybody. And if there are questions and answers, we can take it from here. But what do you say, Matias?
Yeah, I mean, we can take some questions now, or we can also continue however you feel, Jay.
Hi, I'm Rekha. I'm also one of the faculty, and it was a very interesting presentation which we saw. And what I wanted to ask you is, maybe I think it is connected or not, because you people are working with Dharavi for a long time. So I'm just asking a very off tangent maybe. Like looking at the population of Dharavi, suppose if we are all the residents and the commercial aspect of it, and what Matias was showing us, that Toolhouses, do you think that all the residents of Dharavi can be accommodated in the site which we have in the Dharavi, and we can have some more housing for that?
See, I mean, the question of density is one which is important. Density is really part of the kind of qualities that homegrown neighborhoods always have. They are, even if you look at the small town, in India, which grows, slowly now, or it grows over the impulse of migrants coming and basically building something. The level of density, in fact, will not be as different as you may imagine from that of Dharavi. And this is things that we've studied, we've looked at, we've really made some comparisons, looking, for example, at some lanes in small towns just around Mumbai, looking at the commercial density of some of those streets, and then comparing it with the commercial density of, I'm just talking about the establishment on the ground floor, which sells something, in Dharavi main road. It's not that different. So density is part of the process, and density is something which is also, let's say, a flow. It's also something that has a certain dynamics, but doesn't necessarily remain the same the neighborhood which I showed in Tokyo, I showed a few photos of a neighborhood in Tokyo. This neighborhood was considered a slum all the way to the 70s, 80s, and had much higher density levels. As the economic situation improved, as the infrastructure came in, as everybody could get sanitation at home, the neighborhood also became a bit more expensive, and also the city developed on the outskirts, and people moved out. So the neighborhood has lost density over the years. So I don't think we should take the density of Dharavi as something which means that no, we cannot improve anymore, and we have to push people out, forcefully. It's also something that can be part of the process. That a neighborhood will go into different stages, and once it gets really more structured, and then also gains more value, there will be like a very natural process of some people moving out, and some people kind of staying in, and some people moving in also. And so I think that the starting point should, at least the angle that, let's say, urban planners, architects should take in such a neighborhood is not one of forcing and deciding whether people should stay or go. It should be one of helping the neighborhood to improve over time, and helping residents who are already helping themselves, helping them and being part of that process. And I think there is no need to kind of for very forceful, very top-down kind of policies. But what we should really be focusing on and paying attention to is how can we technologically, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of architecture, work within the existing typology, and allow it to become to improve over time. I think this is important.
Okay, thank you. That was quite an interesting explanation. Yeah, I agree with that. It can be a very win-win situation. People do move in and move out, so it has to be a lot of other parameters has to be considered.
Okay. Those processes happen over generations. It's organic as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There is one question which has come in the chat by Aruna Sinha.
Yeah, Aruna, you want to ask the question?
Yes, sir. Okay. Good afternoon, sir. So my question is basically in regards to the concept of homegrown neighborhoods. So is it like a concept which can be applied in urban context only, or is it can it be studied through the way the villages of India have evolved over time? Because in they themselves, in its character, are also organic and evolved over generations by people.
Yeah. Matias?
Yeah. Of course, it totally applies to villages. Villages are usually homegrown. For us, the homegrown just means one thing. It means that a settlement has grown from within using local skills and local energies. So basically, that the people who live in this place are also building it. And so in villages, it's usually the way it happens. You rarely will, call like a big, developer from outside to build new houses. That's not the way it happens. The way it happens is that you will call the local carpenter. You will call maybe people from your community. You maybe contract some people from the village to help build your house, or you do it on your own. So it's something which is extremely like a very local process. But what is really fascinating about the homegrown within the context of a city like Mumbai is that we don't actually realize the kind of value it represents for a neighborhood to be able to internalize the economy of construction. And if you look at a city like Mumbai, the construction sector is a huge part of the wealth of the city and the revenue generation. Why should that money be spent on large companies coming from outside on rebuilding, when inside the neighborhood you have people with capacity, with skills, people who can think, people who know how to build. Why don't we use those resources? Because when you use those resources, you basically letting the money stay in the neighborhood. So this is really part of the kind of like circular economy that we're thinking about and praising in many other ways, in many other terms. We should think about this in terms of construction. And the fact that this is still alive and existing in a mega city like Mumbai, which is also a very modern city, which is also a city which is a global capital now, is something that we should value instead of like dismissing it.
And just a slightly different angle on the same response and question, that you must recognize how many incrementally grown neighborhoods in the village format are also part of a city like Mumbai. So a global city like Mumbai can also have within it urban villages and diverse economies, even until 20 to 30, say not 20, but maybe 40 to 50 years ago. In many parts of contemporary Mumbai, you actually still had agriculture and fishing, which were part of economic activities, even in a city like this. So one thing which we have often talked about is that urban and rural are themselves very problematic categories. These categories are external categories, and they are, they create a grid on urban space, on the story of habitats, and on mobility, which is not always very accurate. So, the reason why the logic of incrementalism can be seen in both urban and rural areas is because all human habitats follow a similar principle. And when we classify something as urban and rural on some very, very basic criteria, like density or like the amount of proportion of people working in agriculture, those have to be seen only as one particular function or variable of habitats themselves, or the story of a neighborhood itself. So that is to also answer your question, Arun.
Thank you, sir.
And if you want, I'll just show you some images, before we take some more questions, which are images of, okay, I'll just show a few quickly, some images of, Dharavi, and it's mixed with also some images of Shivaji Nagar. I just do it very quickly because I'm sure you're familiar with this context. So this is to remind the kind of, what aspects of the homegrown we see. Here typically on the right hand side we see also a Toolhouse, which is a house which is also used for economic activity, and we see also an extension of let's say social space into the street. So like what could be a living room, is happening in the street. This process of creating neighborhoods, places, this is what we're really interested in. How does that happen? Who are the actors? And this is why we've been working for years now with local builders, local contractors. We've ourselves been, and Jay has been a very big part of this for a few years now also. We've been, co-designing places with local builders. We think that those local contractors who come with no formal training but have vast practical experience of construction are really an amazing resource and people that we should value and work with. They represent the capacity of the neighborhood to kind of grow and improve over time. And I'll just quickly show you something that we've done to kind of bring this point across, of the universality of the homegrown typology. And these are a series of collages that we've produced, where we kind of mix Dharavi with other cities around the world. So this is Dharavi collage mixed with Barcelona. Again, we see the streets, as being on the narrow streets. This is the Barrio Gótico, which is the medieval part of Barcelona. This is with a town in Spain, it's a smaller town mixed with Dharavi. Dharavi on the left, on the Ondarabia which is on the border of the French border in the Basque country in Spain. Again, this typology of like a consolidated homegrown village. This is Dharavi and Kathmandu in Nepal, with again construction work happening. This is Dharavi mixed with Paraisopolis in Sao Paulo, with wires going from Mumbai to Sao Paulo. And the little girl is in Sao Paulo, and the young man in front is in Dharavi. This is Dharavi mixed with Shenzhen in China. So Shenzhen, which is the innovation capital of China, where a lot of the electronic innovations come from. This is really like the mecca for anybody doing robotics, anybody working with high tech. Shenzhen has about half of its population living in urban villages. So these are villages which were absorbed, but which also became the places where migrants could actually find a place to live. And those places were typically places where, of course, people opened small shops, but also worked from home to assemble electronic components that would then go into creating electronic devices which are then exported to the global market. So this is one such urban village mixed with social Nagar in Dharavi. This is Dharavi Koliwada, a street, in fact, in which we've worked quite a bit with Jay. We've developed a building for the Koliwada Jamaat over there. So that's on the right, and the left is Perugia in Italy, a small town in Italy. And this is Dharavi mixed with Tokyo. And I just want to ask you, which side do you think is Dharavi and which side is Tokyo? And this is Tokyo today, huh? It's not Tokyo, like 50 years back.
Left side is the Dharavi.
And so the left actually is Tokyo, and this is a very, very typical site in Tokyo. I mean, I just want to emphasize, Tokyo is the largest urban agglomeration in the world. It's a city which is extremely advanced, technologically, economically, obviously culturally also. But it is a city where residential areas have grown incrementally, and the government didn't oppose that process. In fact, the government supported that process, supported the incremental development of those neighborhoods. Till date, today you can still see some small lanes which don't necessarily have concrete on the ground. The floor is also Tokyo. This is central Tokyo. I mean, it's not like a far out suburb. This is a central small street in Tokyo. And you can still see, wood shops, people, buying some material to repair their houses. And you see the same exact scale and a kind of physical density in terms of the construction and the size of the construction, which is very similar to that of Mumbai, in some parts of Mumbai today. This is again an image which mixes Tokyo on Dharavi with Dharavi on the right. So yeah, and then maybe we just.
So I have one question. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, see, now in all your studies, and we all believe that, the connection with the sky and always that ground connection makes the thing very lively. Like even in favelas and everything, when there is the volumes are small and there is some connection with the sky and the people have a connection with the ground, the place becomes very active and it has its character. The problem comes in the minute we go a little high rise, and the space between two buildings or the in-between place starts becoming a problem. So do you have any kind of a study where you have maybe a high-rise construction of a similar group of people, but we have some kind of terracing and some kind of connection of people with the ground or the sky, because I think that makes the settlement a very livable settlement, like, so can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it's nicer if you have a connection to to the sky, and it's really important. But it's not a hard and fast rule that if you go high rise in a neighborhood, which is has narrow lanes, that it necessarily becomes not nice to live in. I mean, it's obviously it's good if it's a bit lower rise and you have more access to the sky and everything. But I'm just like googling some images of Barrio Gotico. I mean, so it's not images that is just whatever comes in now on Google. But what's really interesting in Barrio Gotico in Barcelona is that the buildings, because it's such an old city, they have gone quite high over the years. And sometimes you see buildings which are like 8-story high, in lanes which are actually very narrow, and it does get crowded. And when you live there, it's not you sometimes in some apartments you don't get much light, and it's it would be better if you would get more light, but it's still very livable. So it may not be ideal, but there's no, I would say, you can also think about, I mean, something like a street like this one, for example, there's a way in which a certain quality can still be there, even though, not much light come in. And I understand, I mean, and this is also typically something that would happen in places which are, warmer. And so, to kind of like going a little bit higher and having streets which are kind of protected from the sun has also been kind of like a way of dealing with this. But I mean, in principle, I totally agree with you that if the homegrown typology should not go too high, because it's true that otherwise it becomes very dark and not necessarily nice. But there are examples of this typology which has also gone slightly more high rise, for best and worst.
Okay. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, there's one more question from Dilshad, ma'am. Ma'am, do you want to ask a question, or should I just read it out?
I think they answered it, Jay.
Oh, okay.
By showing those images that it is, generic. It loses its character once it becomes urban.
Yeah.
So, Jay sir, if you don't mind, can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course, Isan.
So, I want to ask Rahul sir and Matthias both, when they start with the designing, they start with the analyzing of a site first. So, what are the parameters they actually see or analyze the site with? Like a basic parameter which they start with.
Rahul, I didn't get the question.
So, for example, if you do a analyzing of a site, right? If you go in Shivaji Nagar or something, or if you go in Dharavi, so there can be some kind of parameters, right, from which you start to analyze the site itself, the tangible part or the intangible part of the site. So, is there any specific parameters, or you just like start observing it and trying to figure out what is going to be the next?
I mean, I think this question is better answered by Matias and Jay, but I'll just say only one thing to start off with. One thing to start off with, which is the fact that we have always believed that whatever is existing in front of us right now is the starting point, for further work. So the tangible, the intangible, the social, historical, physical, economics, all of them as it exists. The present is very much an important part of our approach. We accept the present. We don't say that the present should be like this or should have been like that. So to in fact eliminate as many preconceived notions as possible is really the biggest challenge. In sociology and anthropology, we have something called value neutrality, where we examine all the values which shape us, and then we say, let's come to a neutral zone. So, for example, the moment you are given a context or a site, if you start looking at it and saying that, oh well, it can be this, it can be that, this is not right, this is not right, then we are actually ignoring the incremental history behind that space. So for us, maintaining value neutrality is very important. But I'll let now Matias and Jay to give more, technical response to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, I mean, for us, the starting point has always been relationships. So that we kind of go in a place as people who are potentially actors of that place also, and developing, just understanding how people are already doing to cope with their reality. So, and I think one thing that Rahul just said, which is really, really important, is that I feel our generation of let's say urban practitioners, we've come in a world in which we can no longer believe in big utopias. We cannot no longer believe in the fact that we're going to create a perfect society and that we're going to create the ideal city. Nobody believes in this anymore. We know that the world we inherited from past generations is messed up. We're like in a fundamentally messed up world, messed up cities. They're polluted, they're congested, they've been badly built over years. So our starting point is not one of trying to say that we're gonna go from that messed up situation to like a good ideal stage by doing some great master planning. We don't believe in this. In fact, every time this big master planning thinking has been applied, it's created more disasters. So what we really want to emphasize is, okay, this is it. We're starting from that. It's far from perfect, but we recognize that people themselves are trying to improve this condition. So what are they doing to improve their condition? How are they doing it? They are developing some economic activity. Okay, very good. We need to recognize the fact that this economic activity is so important. Whatever we do should not tamper with it. In fact, whatever we do as an intervention should help them develop their economic activity. People have been relying on local resources. People have been paying very little because they can rely on community networks and they can rely on local contractors. We work with those people. We're not gonna look for like some fancy engineers from the outside. We may bring the engineers, we may bring the good architects at some point in order to kind of, but only from the point of view of understanding how people work and how we can improve it. So how can we add value to the processes which are already in place? That's the question we ask ourselves in our practice.
Thanks, Matias. Matias, even I have a question here. Like in case of a completely virgin land, or if you're thinking about a complete new development, but in the context of the homegrown neighborhoods, so how do we look at maybe it's a kind of a government scheme to kind of rehabilitate, not to rehabilitate as such, but kind of a housing kind of a typology to emerge in the locality. So if it's a completely fresh project, like how would you kind of help us structure that? Like how would you kind of give us an insight of what should be the procedure that we should go about when we are doing that?
The completely virgin land is like a total myth. It doesn't exist. Like even if you go to like the far out countryside somewhere and you see a plot of land, this place has a history, it has an ecology, it has a context, it has people who've gone through it, it has a species which occupy it, it has a vegetation, it has something. There's always a starting point. It's always inhabited. So we just have to get out of this thinking of the kind of the virgin land or the white page. It just simply doesn't exist. And our first task, and which is really important, it's a first task, but it's gonna determine everything which is done afterwards, is to say, what is the dynamic in place over here? How does it work? What purpose does it serve? What populations does it serve? And then, of course, what could it do? What more can it do than what it does now? So you recognize the existing, and on the basis of this understanding, you start thinking about the potential. So I don't know if so. I mean, this is for the Virgin Land. Then, if you're thinking about, I don't know exactly what if you're referring to something in particular. But I would say that even if you let's say, okay, you have like a plot of land in a homegrown neighborhood and you have to do like a house from scratch, there again, I would go to look at what are existing practices of construction, where do you get the materials from cheap, what are the needs of the people who are going to be staying in the house. What is the dynamic in place in the streets right now? How can you positively contribute to this dynamic, which is already in place? So, this is really just where do you, how do you kind of become part of a process which is already in place? Whether it's an ecological process, a social process, an economic process, and also a cultural context, and political context. I mean, all of that has to come into play. That's why the architect cannot work in a vacuum. Whenever architecture works in a vacuum, as if it was, like the kind of studio work of a sculptor and artist who just does art for its own sake, it's never good. It may be good in a gallery, but it's not going to be good in context. So I just feel, this is really kind of something that needs to be emphasized in the profession of architecture itself.
Thanks a lot, Matias, for answering that question. I think it brings in a clarity for the project that we are even involved in. There's one more question from Varuna. Varuna, you want to go ahead again?
Yes, sir. So my question is rather on. Sorry.
No, I'm just saying, on the background, as you asked the question, I'm just showing the photo album of Jay.
Don't do that, yeah.
Yes, sir. So what I was asking was, when we go ahead with our project during this semester, so one of the thing is the diversity of people that is there in the Shivaji Nagar area. So when we are, if we take this homegrown neighborhood approach, doesn't diversity of people within the neighborhood become like an obstacle or problem in taking this approach? And by diversity, I mean there is so many religious ethnicities present over there, people of different beliefs and different economic classes and all those things.
Rahul, you want to answer?
Sure. See, diversity is a default condition of all human existence, right? Wherever you go, wherever you think maybe there's a culture which is very homogeneous, it's not really so homogeneous. So diversity does not become any obstacle. It does not become a problem. It is something which for us is a given. Now the point is that how much control do people have over the neighborhood, and in what forms do they express that control is very important. So sometimes, in certain contexts, belief, ethnicity, all these things are important, and they shape the way in which the neighborhood looks. I mean, in many European countries, the presence, say, of a mosque, right, is a sign, is a symbol of different communities living over there. Now, I know everywhere people accept the fact if the political context is mature, then they accept, and they work within it. And sometimes if the political context is not mature, then they don't like diversity. But that's got nothing to do with the neighborhood. That is to do with something else, something external, something outside. So in the case of Dharavi, we have often found that different communities have actually asserted their identity very clearly. So the creation of low-caste temples, the creation of mosques, the creation of churches, Pentecostal churches, all of them also find an expression. And even our what we call architectural language responds to that. In Shivaji Nagar, we designed a mosque, we designed a Shiv temple, and all this was in many ways an expression of the neighborhood's marking of itself, in terms of its ethnicity. So it's really, and that is something which we feel exists everywhere. You will find it in the European context. You will find these debates in England, and in India, in China, everywhere. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
And diversity, I mean, it cannot be seen as a problem. I mean, it can be seen as a difficulty in some cases, for sure. But it's fundamentally like a wealth to start building on. Like diversity is what triggers creativity, innovation, new solutions. What challenges you. So I mean, it should be celebrated in the work of an architect. It's a wonderful thing to have. I mean, imagine a world in which there's no diversity. You already know, what to expect, how to build it. What do people like, what do people want. And it's always the same thing. I mean, this is like really the most boring place to work as a creative person. So diversity is the most wonderful challenge that we're confronted with in our profession.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions from any students? I think it's only Aruna who has asked 2 questions. There's nobody else. Dua, do you have any questions?
No, sir, not as such. My questions are covered.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So I hope that was useful for everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul, and thank you, Matias, for making time here. And out of this entire busy schedule. So right now, Rahul is in Goa and Matias is in Geneva, and they're extremely busy working on various projects. So thank you very much.
We could not coordinate properly between the 3 of us. So in the start, there was a little bit of uncertainty of how to proceed.
No.
Yeah.
But Rahul, I think it was fantastic. It gave us it was really fantastic, and it gave very good insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul and Matias.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Yeah.
It was wonderful having you here, and we hope to have you again soon.
Yes, definitely. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you.